Hi guys, welcome to Root Stem, and today we're going to talk about setting up your tables. Guys, there you are. Right. Yes, I know I've done a video before about setting your terrain up in 10th edition, but that was kind of like a beginner's guide. This one's going to be a little bit more what you do when you've actually got a 6 by 4 gaming table, which I've got. I've got mats to play the smaller formula type, but I do much prefer to play on the bigger tables. I think you get more of a tactical edge advantage, and you can also put down more terrain. And what I'm also going to be talking about is the fact that in my last video, I said you need to at least have a quarter of your table set up. I actually go for more terrain now that I've played quite a few games of 10th edition of 40k. I don't generally go for the, hey, let's just have a quarter on there, or let's just have a little bit. I go for quite a lot, making it quite dense, you know, like using a lot of ruins, but sometimes using smaller ruins and larger ruins so that you can get a lot more avenues of line of sight blocking terrain. So I'm going to go through that with this particular table, which I've already done at the beginning of this, but you'll be seeing it as I started. I am going to do this as a bit more of a tournament style setup, so we're going to be putting the objectives down first. Traditionally for me, I always put the objectives down after I've set the terrain up. So as you can see here, we've got a standard 6 by 4 board. Using 6 by 4, of course, that's more of a preference for myself. If you are using a 6 by 4 board, what I do recommend to do is to kind of change your rules just a little bit. Rather than having it 6" from the short table edges, have it 12, because the table is a foot longer. So you're kind of losing, normally you shave off 6" from either side. That kind of makes it a little bit more difficult to get hold of objectives sometimes when you're outflanking. So if you're using sustained, if you're using the reserve rules, I've forgotten what we call strategic reserves, rather than coming on 6", come on 12" within 12, because that balances it up to make it easier for those units to grab the objectives, because on the objective cards, it's all set up from effectively the middle. Also, when it comes to the long table edges, these are shaved down by 2 inches, so make sure that that's, rather than a 6" for strategic reserves, it's an 8". Now, as you can see, I've got the table nice and clear. I'm going to draw the deployment card. Now, I'm doing this as if you're playing some form of tournament game. Normally, myself, I set all the terrain up, then we draw the cards because it makes it a little bit more fun. But for in this particular instance, we're going to do it as Games Workshop intends. So I've got the cards in front of me. Just going to grab that one and turn you around. Search and destroy. One of my favourite deployment types, because it means that certain units are close, other units are far away. Effectively, it's like that. Doesn't matter who's the attacker defender. So we're going to have terrain in there. We're going to have terrain in here. But what we do need, now that I've drawn that mission, we do need an objective in the centre, and we need those around the edges. Now, when I set the terrain up, I want to make sure that that objective in the centre is kind of closed off, and so the other objectives, maybe put those into ruins, making it look like we're trying to grab hold of stuff. Now, I'm going to talk about objective placement. The reason I'm going to talk about objective placement is because at my local club and at the shop that I sometimes play at, I've noticed a lot of people seem to get very confused on how you're supposed to do this. Now, one of the ways is to put your marker right in the centre and then measure everything from the centre of the table. The problem is with that is a lot of the time people, like, will try and measure that bit, it goes wonky, it doesn't really work. So what I've started doing is taking the calculations, using a bit of math, applying it to the board that we're on, this being a 6 by 4, and then taking the inches away. So the centre objective and placement on this one is quite easy, because we're on a 6 by 4 board. Measure out 2 feet, measure out 3 feet. From there, you've got the centre. There we go. Objective 1 placed down in the centre of the tabletop. Job's a good one. Now, for these little sections, as you can see, they are 16" up and 12" in. Now, on a 4 wide table, that's quite easy to do calculation-wise. Each foot is 12". So the width of this table is 48 inches. All you need to do is to cut that in half, makes it 24, and then you minus off 12, which means 12. So effectively, that objective, which, let's grab objective 2, is going to be 12 inches in from here, And because we're doing it from that corner, we now need to work out that bit. Now, this is a 6-foot board. That will make it 72 inch. We're going to minus off the 16, get the equation that we need, and then measure from the corner rather than measuring from the center, and you'll actually get something a lot more accurate. So that's literally going to be 20 inches. And I've got a 12-inch range ruler from kind of like the Necromunda style games. It's 20, put in the center of the objective by 12. If we've got those nice, bigger, fancier objectives, I'm going to try and get myself a bunch that's got the radius on there. It's a lot easier to kind of set these up. But that's 20 by 12 on each of these corners because of the deployment that we've drawn. There we are, 20 by 12 for each of these particular objectives gives you a nice little idea of the battle zone that you're going to be fighting over. Now, when I'm creating my battle zone in my head, I like to know what terrain I've got. I also like to kind of theme it a little bit, try and make it a little bit different to what you would normally see. We've got to make sure we've got plenty of line of sight blocking terrain because this game, even though they said they've nerfed it down and it's not as killy, it is still very killy. What you don't want is a turn 1 alpha strike. It's boring. It's not fun. And the amount of times I come across people online that show their games and they complain that, you know, the game's over by turn 2. I look at the tabletop and I think to myself, it's because you've got your standard, you know, your standard table, I think it's 40 by 60. Sorry, 42? I can't remember. Your standard table size, and I've got 6 pieces of terrain on there, and like 2 of them are blocking. You're playing 2,000 points. It's no good. You need a good chunk of terrain. Now, in a previous video, I talked about at least having a quarter. When you're playing a tournament style game, that's all right for narrative. When you're playing a tournament style game, you probably want a little bit more, especially with the way this game runs. You might even want to try and get up to half of the tabletop to have at least some form of terrain on it. I'm going to be putting something to block line of sight going across the centre. I'm probably also going to use these as maybe ruins to create line of sight blocking from coming from corners, because we are going to be deploying in a corner style deployment zone. So it's going to be a bit odd to try and block a lot of the line of sight. So what I'm probably going to use is some trees and then just trying to make it as thematic as I possibly can. So now I've put down my ruins and I've put down my trees, and I've used some of those little markers that you get for deployment zones, because we're not going to need, I'm going to use dice, just to sort of mark out where some of the ruins are. I'm going to use some, it's kind of like bird grit, or pebbles that you get at the bottom of fish tanks. I'll show you the bag in a second. And we're going to kind of like outline them, put a little bit in the middle, just so that people can actually understand that that is the ruin. And of course, that you can't fire through that ruin. We've got quite a few ruins on here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. You know, 4 medium-sized ones really. We've got 2 sort of like littler ones in the corners, but these littler ones are going to provide that sort of, that little tiny bit of line of sight blocking terrain. Now we do have a big bit here, no terrain. We do have a big bit over there with no terrain. I'm going to put some, I've got some craters, but a crater down in the middle means if somebody gets a lucky shot off, we're going to be able to handle it. And what I might do is extend this out here with some barricades, because that's what we have left in my boxes. We've got some barricades. Rumble, rumble. I've made sure that that's kind of like a very centralised objective. We're going to count these as obscuring, so you're not going to be able to fire over them. These should just block line of sight as normal, so hopefully there'll be no massive lines of fire to each other in the first turn of the game, but we do have nice bits of terrain to be able to elevate ourselves and make sure we've got some plunging fire going ahead if need be. Right, put my little extras on. So this is what I've got, premium aquarium gravel, and we've just used it to denote, sometimes I tend to put it all in the middle, but I think today I'm just going to use it to denote the edges of the actual pieces. And you can see we've got quite a bit of terrain on here. Got some barricades providing little bits of cover if you can get close to them, but are not really interfering with some long range fire. We've got some nice little bits of blocking right in the centre, and having that objective right there, making sure that you're trying to claim that canister for whatever it contains will give us a nice little bit of story going into the game. Yeah, this, to me, this table's looking nice, dense. We've even still got channels still so that you can get tanks down and dreadnoughts without too much of an issue or problem. And of course, the little lower end of the actual ruins, you can just count tanks as being able to go through them. But then, of course, we won't be able to go through the big pylon bits of the actual ruin itself. Gives you a nice bit of variety, make sure that you can actually have quite a dense towels in the corner. You can have quite a dense board without it really compromising your game. And there you go, there is a finished table, ready for a lot of, we've got some avenues a little bit blocked off, but we've got a lot of line of sight blocking terrain on there, and we should give us each other a really, really good game on this. We should be able to try and create some isolated pockets and have warriors go at it quite effectively within this tabletop. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Hopefully this improves your games of 10th edition. And of course, if people are saying to you, you've got too much terrain on there and I've only got 6 pieces on, show them this video, tell them they have not. Please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button if you do want to see more, and we'll see you next time.